From the worldwide leader in journalism, truth, and democracy, this is the Poynter Report Podcast, a joint production between the Poynter Institute and the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Now here's your host from the Poynter Institute, Tom Jones.
Hey everybody, thanks for listening and for watching on YouTube as well. I'm really excited about our guest for this episode. It's MSNBC's Jen Psaki. As all of you surely know, Jen has had an extensive career in politics, working in both the Obama and Biden White Houses. She, of course, was the White House press secretary for Joe Biden's administration until May of 2022. Not long after she left the White House, she joined MSNBC and has been host of Sunday's Inside with Jen Psaki since March of 2023. And this week, she starts a new show in prime time. You can watch The Briefing with Jen Psaki Tuesday through Friday nights at 9 p.m. Eastern on MSNBC. Jen, I know you're swamped getting ready for your new show. Thanks so much for taking the time.
Thank you. I'm a listener, and I'm so looking forward to talking to you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I really appreciate it. First off, I love the name of the show, The Briefing. I know it's kind of a reference to your former job at the White House, which makes it clever, obviously. But also, I think there's more to it behind it than just a clever name. I'm assuming you could have kept the name Inside with Jen Psaki, but I understand it was your idea to change it. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It was, that was one of the first questions I asked was, can I change the name of my show? Which there are much more important things to think about. But I do think it sends a message to the audience about what to expect. And one of my takeaways, I'm not the only one, from the 2024 election was insiders do not have all the answers. And I did not want to be projecting to our audience. Yes, I will talk to people who have extensive experience in government, have been in government, newsmakers, of course, that insiders are the only ones, because often the story in moments like this is happening in the country in a grassroots way and people you don't even necessarily know yet. The other thing I've thought a lot about is, people are, there's the news cycle right now, I don't have to tell you, is so crazy. It is just hard to follow the thread. And I do this professionally for a living of so many stories at the same time. And when I run into people on the train or at the grocery store, oftentimes their questions are like, what's happening with the IRS? What's going on? Or what's going on with this Signal Gate thing? Is it still happening? People... Yeah. And how does it impact me? And I've thought a lot about, I have many things I'm terrible at, biking, singing, many others, but diving deeply into a lot of information and trying to explain it is maybe one of my superpowers. Many I don't have. And so naming it The Briefing does go back to my roots, but it also is hopefully something that will, I hope, if I do my job right, meet the moment that of kind of the appetite people have for actual accurate information.
Yeah, so I'm getting the sense that it's less about how I should think about something as much as it is like, just tell me what it is before you even explain it. Yeah.
Yeah, but I think also, people are going to think what they want to think. That even people who watch my show, but I hope when they watch it, they learn something they didn't know. And I think I'll take the Signal Gate story because it's one of my favorite ones. Pete Hegseth. It's the gift that keeps on giving to the news industry in some ways. One of the things I've done in my career is, of course, spent a lot of time dealing with classified information and sitting in the Situation Room and traveling with people who have access to high-level classified information, presidents, secretaries of state. So a value add, you want to tell people what's happening, but also telling people, here's the thing about being the Secretary of Defense. You can get access to a classified phone line at any point in time, anywhere in the world. You literally turn to a staffer and say, hey, I need to have a classified conversation. You can't even bring AirPods, which we all use, into the Situation Room. Things that may sound like little minute details, but I think help people understand, I hope, what's happening and why it is so out of the norm. And also how it's impacting people. That's the other thing I think about this moment that is, I felt a shift, even among people who are Democrats or progressives, or maybe they're opposed to Trump, whatever. People aren't totally satisfied with just Trump is bad. It's just not enough, right? It's just not enough. And there's just a greater expectation from elected officials, from the media, from people who are out there who have a platform that they're going to do more than that.
Doing what I do, consuming as much media as I do, critiquing the media, I've always been bothered when people try to equate like Fox News with MSNBC. They say things like, well, the right has Fox and the left has MSNBC. And I don't think that's true. I don't think that's a fair comparison. I think Fox is much more biased and unapologetically so in many cases. Having said that, obviously MSNBC probably draws a more left-leaning audience. Does that factor at all into your approach when you do your show, that who your audience is exactly? Do you know who your audience is exactly?
It's actually more it's more diverse than people think it is, I will say, from looking at the data. I mean, one of the other differences, which I don't have to convince you, is we actually have a kind of legal and standards department, and we can't go on television and just share things that are not fact-based, right? That is not true. There are certainly people who don't do that on Fox, but there are plenty who do. And that is still a standard that we have to follow here. I think what people can expect is more, first of all, for anybody who thinks that MSNBC is totally the mouthpiece of the left, just look at how we all responded to the debate just last June, immediately afterwards. And no one was on TV, not me, not Rachel Maddow, no one saying, not Lawrence O'Donnell saying, you didn't see what you just saw. And that is something that you have to remember as you're thinking about viewers too. I think that there's an expectation that we're not going to blow through the damage that's being done to our democracy, to our systems, to so many communities out there, and that is going to be a bigger focus for us than maybe others. It doesn't mean it is every day I'm going to wake up and think about how I can do a takedown of something. That's not how you wake up. It's more explaining and providing clarity. And also there's plenty of fodder to do a takedown as necessary in this moment. So I think that's how I think about it. I also think, the thing about this moment, and this is, I loved having a podcast. We're going to relaunch it in the fall, but is, there's also a lot of stories about the Democratic Party and what the heck is happening and where it's going. And there isn't agreement. So good. Those conversations are interesting to be had. There shouldn't be agreement because guess what? It didn't really work. So those are also, to me, I think, really interesting conversations. Some of these primaries that are happening, some of these debates about should you go fully after Trump or should you not? By all means, even David Hogg and the DNC, all of these things. I love a good debate. You don't have to yell at each other in a nasty way, but that's the other thing I think is interesting about this moment.
Yeah, you sort of led into a question I was going to ask in a bit. Is there a way to cover Trump differently than what we've seen? I guess it's sort of a roundabout way of asking do you think the media is meeting the moment when it comes to covering Trump?
Well, one of the challenge is I experienced, and actually Chris Hayes and I had a good conversation about this. He wrote this book about attention, and I did his book event when he was here, and we were talking about how even for us, he has a show 4 nights a week. I'm about to have a show 4 nights a week. You have 42 minutes on a show, right? Because of commercials. You can't cover all the stories happening that day, and you have to choose. And we have to choose, especially because I think there's an expectation for people who turn into MSNBC prime shows. You're not going to blow through 9 stories and just do the top lines. That's important. And there are a lot of important media outlets who do exactly that. But that is not what our viewers expect. So you have to therefore select. And I say that to get to your question, because for us, I think, and for me, the way I've thought about it is you have to select a couple of things that you're going to follow extensively, right? Now, there are days, as you know, as a massive consumer and explainer and critic of the media, where it's like there's one big story and we all should do the one big story. But I also think if we can figure out as individuals and as hosts how we can follow the threads of things and be deeper on it, we're going to be more informative. And that, I think, is a little bit different maybe than how things were covered 8, 7, 6 years ago.
Clearly, this has been a chaotic 100 days of the Trump administration. I watched your Sunday show just recently, the other day. And you mentioned good news, we only have 1,300 more days left. But many people, just the thought of that is exhausting. I know a lot of people, smart people, educated people who like to keep up on current affairs, who are like, you know what, I can't do it anymore. I can't watch the news. It's too depressing. It upsets me. I'm just going to avoid it. I'll take the bare minimum. So as someone who talks politics, who does a news show as you mentioned, about to embark 4 days a week. What do you say to those people? And how do you do a show about topics that, quite frankly, are really depressing for a lot of people?
Yeah. I mean, one of the things I've thought about, I mean, Simone Sanders, who's a colleague of mine, said this. I think we were doing an interview together. I can't remember. But she said at some point, I thought it was very smart. Politics is going to move on whether you're participating or not. It's happening, right? So people who wanted to, and this was true of friends of mine, people who I've known forever, people who I've worked in politics with, in November and December, so many people would say to me, I mean, again, on the train and whatever, but on text, I can't do it. I'm not turning on the TV. I'm not reading the news. And you saw that in the ratings, right?
Yeah,
it's like,
sure.
that was the truth. People started to come back. And I think part of it is you have to give people something, you got to be not hold back in telling the story of what's happening in the Trump administration. That is, he is the president. The Republicans do control everything in Washington right now, and they control a lot of state capitals. You do have to spend time explaining that. People want to know. But you also, I think, got to talk about what else is happening, right? That means, Rachel's been doing a lot of course, coverage of these protests, and we've done some of it. We'll continue to some of it. But I think part of it is, as I mentioned, debates within the Democratic Party. That's important. But also things like, what are state attorney generals doing that's kind of interesting? It's not something people consume at every moment, but people are doing interesting things. Who are some of these up and coming leaders who are emerging out of the darkness right now that many people who are Democrats or who didn't vote for Trump feel? Let's bring some of them on. Are all of them going to be magical? No, they're not. You end an interview and that person has a thing or they don't have a thing. But some of that is using it as a platform to introduce some of that and trying to tell some of the stories of kind of the grassroots movements, the activism, people who are standing up and doing things that are out of the norm a little bit. So I think that's an important part of what we all do. Is it every day? Maybe not. It has to be authentic, but I think it's a part of what we think about.
How hard is it to commit to something like that? Because I'm sure the easy thing is, hey, let's just turn on the cameras at 9:00. Let's just rail on Trump for an hour.
No one, look, there's amazing, wonderful bosses here. I work with all of them. We get advice. No one asked me to do this, right? Or to think about it this way. I think one of the benefits for myself personally, as I approach this job, is I came from politics, right? And I know I've seen the cycles and ups and downs, and this moment and everything Trump is doing is darker than what I have. It makes the period after George W. Bush won re-election seem a little quaint to me. But that period, I mean, I worked on the Kerry campaign. He lost, obviously. After that, Democrats lost. A bunch of Senate seats were lost. I was 24, 5, I can't remember, somewhere in that ballpark. I was interviewing for jobs on Capitol Hill, just like everybody else. We were all interviewing for the same jobs. I had $27 in my bank account. I didn't want to ask my parents for help. I remember eating a lot of like egg and cheese sandwiches because you could just it was like cheap, and I didn't want to call my parents because I was the one who decided to work in politics. Anyway, that period of time, there were all these stories written, you probably remember this, about how Republicans would be in charge forever, right? It was never, and then 2 years later, Democrats won back the House. I was working in the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee. 2 years after that, a guy named Barack Hussein Obama became president, right? And he, by the way, for people who are like, who's going to be president now? I get asked this question, who's going to be the nominee on the Democratic side? I'm like, I have no earthly clue, because no one would have said Barack Obama couple of months after the election in 2004. And so to me, what informs my thinking on this is that you want to be paying attention to this stuff, because at some point someone's going to hit, or something's going to hit, or something's going to be something's going to, and you want to be following it along because it's an important part of the story of politics in our country and policy making and governing at this moment.
What's it like to be a daytime host of a show that airs 4 nights a week? We'll talk about that when we come back.
Take your career to the next level. The University of South Florida, St. Petersburg is offering a master's degree in digital journalism and design. Do the entire program from home and complete it in as little as 1 year. The cost is reasonable. The experience is invaluable. For more information, call 727-873-4544.
What keeps you up at night? The spread of misinformation has fostered distrust in our democratic systems. The Poynter Institute is a global nonprofit with an unmatched dedication to the pursuit of truth. Home of PolitiFact, MediaWise, and the International Fact-Checking Network, we are committed to nonpartisan fact-checking and media literacy. Please consider making a meaningful contribution to ensure that Poynter's work continues. Visit poynter.org/give.
Jen, you're used to hosting once, twice a week. Now you're going to the daily show, or 4 nights a week. What's that transition going to be like? How different do you think it might be to do a show that many days a week compared to what you've been doing?
We were having the executive producer of my show, Alex Lubick, a host, completely amazing. I couldn't do the show without him. This is what people don't see. You have these producers who are so smart and brilliant and make you better. We have actually, this is such a funny fact, 2 Jeopardy champions on my new team here. Wow. It's like, how is that possible? Only here in this scenario. It's like 10% of our team won Jeopardy. Anyway, my point is this. I always feel better about approaching any job when I was the press secretary, when I'm prepared, right? And I love to read everything, consume everything the person said. And so when we're in this phase, we're launching this new show in a week from now. Last week, we were talking to one of these brilliant segment producers that works for Rachel, we're also going to work with. And he said, don't take this the wrong way, but remember, there's only so much you can prepare for, right? You have no idea what the news is going to be Tuesday, May 6th, when the show premieres, right? Which is very true. So I take that in mind. We've been trying out in the last couple of weeks, and I can talk to you about this because you're in the weeds of things, a longer A block, which is the start of a show.
Right.
We're never going to be like anybody else, as I've said many times, like Rachel Maddow is the queen bee of all things, and I could never be her, even if I went to Rachel Maddow school. She's a brilliant genius, amazing what she does, and I've learned a ton from her. But what I've also discovered, too, about myself is that I'm much better when I'm not rushed, right? And it is hard to do that in cable TV because you have breaks and you have a structure, and there are certain things like you have to have a certain number of commercials. But what we've discovered is if we do a 10 or 12 minute A block where I can try to explain by tapping into my time in the sit room or the time I was in the Oval with Obama or Biden or whatever, something about politics on the Hill, of which I've spent a lot of time, interjecting that into things, that's going to make for a better explanation, right? And more time and air to do it. Well, you try things until they don't work, right? So we're going to try that. I also find that sometimes conversations with newsmakers feel quite rushed, or I find that it's like, and because I've been on shows for 20 years, right? Or maybe less than that, but 15 years I've been appearing on shows. And sometimes you'll sit down with the best host possible and they'll say, okay, we have 4.5 minutes. We're going to cover the future of the Democratic Party, Russia, Ukraine. And if we can get to the budget debate on the Hill, we'll get there too. And you're like, how in the space time
in 4 minutes
is that possible? It's not really possible. And so again, you try things until they don't work, and we won't do this every night, but we want to try it. And we've been trying this on Mondays. Well, actually yesterday we had Adam Schiff on, Senator Adam Schiff, and we probably did 15 minutes with him, 16 minutes with him, which, as you know, is a very long time for a cable news hour. And so we're going to try that and give time, a little bit more space and time for conversations. And then we're going to try, as we've been talking about, to whenever we can leave a little bit of space for kind of rising stars. Because sometimes I discover people from this too. When I have them on, I'm like, that person's good, you know?
Like in politics or in media or both or what?
In politics, but they don't have to be in elected office. Maybe they're running for elected office. Maybe they're running an organization. You know, the thing about moments like this, when there's literally nobody winning who's won anything, and the approval rating for the Democratic Party is, I don't know, in the 30s, and same with Congress, it means there's space, nowhere to go but up, everybody. So kind of, there's lots of types of people you can have on.
You know, I as far as having people on, I want to get your thoughts on this. I watch the Sunday shows, Meet the Press and This Week and Face the Nation, and a lot of the interviews are contentious. You have moderators who are asking really good questions, but then you're going to have guests who are going to be on there giving their spin on things. Would you ever have interest on having somebody like Carolyn Leavitt, the press secretary, or Marco Rubio or J.D. Vance if you didn't think it was going to be like an honest conversation? Like, what's the value of some of those Sunday conversations when we sort of know going in, like, this isn't, you're probably not going to get the answers that you want.
Yeah. I mean, look, I think part of the bar too for me is like, is this a person that I think is contributing information that's valuable to the audience who's watching? That is a very hard thing to define, right? We've had Republicans on my show on Sundays and Mondays in the past. And if the moment or the story warrants, then like we will again, right? And it may. But to me, I mean, I don't mind a fight at all. And sometimes, and I do still meet the press. I did it yesterday, and you can disagree. And I finished the Meet the Press roundtable, and I was like, ugh. Every now and then I level like a little battle, where you're like, that's not true. But what I think is also true, and when I was a contributor at CNN during the first Trump administration, there was a lot of battling and fighting, right? And and I would be on the other side of that, and you'd battle with Scott Jennings, who was there still then, and all these people. Is like, it's just it's not all authentic feeling, right? People screaming at each other. It's just like, is that furthering the conversation? But I do think you have to find a place where it's like, it's not boring. We can't just all agree with each other all the time, because that's also not authentic and kind of boring. I'd love to have David Hogg and James Carville on together and talk about, they freaking disagree and they've had a back and forth. That's interesting. So that's how I've thought about it. I'm happy to have people on who I disagree with. That's fine. But I don't want to do it in a performative way. It's like I could have Ted Cruz on and we could yell at each other for 10 minutes. Is that constructive? Maybe it will go viral on Twitter, but like, is that valuable? Not really.
Yeah, I think as long as it feels authentic, if it feels like you said, performative, it's like, okay, you take this side and you're going to take this side and we'll duke it out for 6-7 minutes or whatever. But if it's authentic, I think it works, right?
Yeah, if it's authentic, sure. And I can't remember what it was about. It was sometime last year around the election, and we were all doing a special in New York, and I was sitting next to Lawrence O'Donnell, who I just love and have huge respect for. And he said something, and I just completely disagreed with him. And I was like, I don't think that's right, or whatever I said. And afterwards I said, hey, I'm sorry, I kind of just like jumped at you. And he goes, no, that's good. We all do disagree. We don't agree on everything, right? And that's an important part of the conversation right now too. And it should be fostered without crossing the line of feeling like, get in the ring and you guys battle each other.
You know what though? I mean, I wonder, we've seen this administration, and no one's surprised. They're going after the press. They go after the media. You have the Associated Press being kicked out of the pool reporting. Trump is suing CBS. He sued ABC. He's tried to wipe out Voice of America. He's going after NPR, PBS. He constantly attacks places like where you work, MSNBC, CNN, New York Times. And I think the troubling part is that it's not more troubling to people. And I'm sure you've worked. Yeah. You worked with President Obama. You worked with President Biden. They didn't always agree with the media. You famously had some playful, not so playful battles with Peter Doocy at Fox. Yeah. But we've never seen anything like this.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that? And does that contribute to sort of like, even when you try to have honest discussions like on your show, if that's even possible, because we're so divided because of what, quite frankly, this administration has done?
Yeah. Peter Doocy, first of all, we had a good relationship. We would talk about stories. He would text me or call me, or he'd come to my office. There's a performative nature about the briefing room. That's just a fact, right? That's a story as old as the age of time. But what I think is different about this, I spent 2.5 years at the State Department as the spokesperson. And when I was there was the first, not the first, but it was 2014, 2015, Russia invaded Ukraine. And I ended up being kind of the face of speaking on behalf of the US government position on that, which was that it's illegal and outrageous. And I became this target. Now, I was 33 or however old I was at the time, of the Kremlin and the RT and Russian propaganda. And I use this example because it was very informative to me at the time of how this sort of propaganda, and I see similarities because it is delegitimizing powerful, valuable voices in order to try to scare them. That is what's happening right now. It is making up things. It is They used to make up quotes I never said about obscure foreign policy issues, but then they would push them out to their public and Eastern Europe. There is that. They have a state-run media there. That I think is the goal of the Trump administration, is people who are going to ask questions, like in the Oval Office that day when Trump and Vance berated Zelensky, and one of the questions in the room from our quote unquote reporter was, "Why, Zelensky, are you not wearing a suit?" I mean, really? That's your question? He's also Marjorie Taylor Greene's
I was going to say it's a Marjorie Taylor boyfriend, yeah.
But I think what's dangerous is that I had plenty of fisticuffs with not just Fox, but you have disagreements with reporters in the briefing room. You have disagreements with them about stories. That's a healthy part of democracy. The press secretary and the press should not always be in agreement. You have different objectives, right? You have a shared one of sharing accurate information with the public, but you have different things every day. The press would like there to be a daily press conference with every president. Of course they do. That's not of interest to the press secretary or to the White House. But when you start to eliminate outlets like wire services, by the way, which your listeners know this, but I mean, AP, they're straight news reporters, right? It's good, it's bad, it's just, they're gonna say, this is what happened. Bloomberg News, you know what they would call you about? The markets and some obscure movement in the budget debate, because that's what they cover. Reuters is gonna wanna know what the status is of the Ukraine-Russia negotiations. That's important information for public consumption. They are not biased. They are not leaning one side or the other. That's not their thing. When you're kicking them out of the Oval Office and you're kicking them out of the briefing room, first of all, what are you so scared of? A. But second, you are taking away an accurate means of delivering information to the American public. And that is a very slippery slope to becoming only Marjorie Taylor Greene's boyfriend and other people in the briefing room sharing their version of events, which is also Caroline Leavitt and Trump's version of events.
Yeah, actually, at first when the White House announced we're going to have this spot for new media and everything, I actually didn't hate the idea.
Yeah.
I thought, but who that new media is, I think we all had concerns going in.
Yeah.
With that. Yeah. As you mentioned, you had a TV background. You worked at CNN a little bit in between your work in the White House. But we've seen other press secretaries. Kayleigh McEnany has gone on to do well on TV. Dana Perino, George Stephanopoulos was communications director. We've had other examples, aside from obviously being comfortable speaking in public and being cool and comfortable and nuanced and that sort of thing. Is there something about that job, White House press secretary or communications department, that makes it so easy to make the transition? I don't know, maybe it isn't easy, but that makes those people good on television.
We had nerd prom this weekend in Washington,
White House
D.C.
correspondence.
They like to call it. And you just interact with all sorts of people. And I was speaking to this communications official, actually for a Republican senator. And what she said to me, which was very kind, was, I appreciate that you, like Dana Perino, know what reconciliation is. You understand how Hill legislation happens. You know what it means, what a pool is at the White House and what it isn't. And I think there have been, every time somebody makes a transition like this, there's like how can this happen? Why? This is outrageous. And the thing about it is Kayleigh and I may disagree, Dana and I may disagree, and I know her, fairly well, but you come from a background of understanding how government works, how politics works. And that does inform how you try to inform viewers. That's same for George Stephanopoulos, of course, many years ago. I mean, Diane Sawyer worked in the Nixon White House, right? Tim Russert worked in the Senate. Lawrence O'Donnell worked in the Senate. Lawrence O'Donnell and I can go down a nerdy rabbit hole about Senate processes. And that, coming from a background, there's so many forms of journalism, which I think is a wonderful thing, war correspondents, AP reporters, local news, all of it is valuable. It is also valuable, especially in moments like this, to have an understanding of how government works. And that can come from many different ways. But, I do think that helps in moments like this, when it's like, what does the IRS do? Why are we talking about the IRS having an agreement with the Department of Homeland Security? Well, it's like, because it's crazy. That's why we're talking about it. But I do think it's valuable and sometimes can be undervalued from people who are like, well, you can only be in media, which again is so broad. What does that mean? If you have like if you went to journalism school and you moved through every local market, that may have been true once. It is certainly not true today because the people consuming get to decide what they want to consume. You know,
I mean, there's no difference really. I come from a sports background. It's no different than networks hiring former players and coaches to give analysis. Who knows better than them? So.
Yeah, exactly. And they've lived it. I mean, I am a sports fan and it's like they've lived it. Some of them are better than others, as I'm sure you'd agree, because there are moments when Hamlin, yes, I'm remembering Buffalo in Buffalo.
Right.
I was watching that game, and when that happened, I remember watching and thinking like these very smart people don't know what to do in a breaking news moment. And this is a breaking news moment, right? Where you have somebody laying on the field. Some people are better than others, but like that's true. Coming from a background of it means you've lived it, and that can be informative to viewers.
Before I let you go, I don't know how much you can share. Like, what's your life going to be like now? I mean, it's a 9:00 show.
Yeah.
Which is it's a lot of preparation. First of all, an hour show a day. You're a mom. You have a family. Like, what's your schedule look like on a day of when your show actually gets off the ground?
I'm going to learn that very soon. I think for me, my kids, I've had so many weird schedules with my kid as a mom with my kids. When I was the press secretary, they used to get up with me at 5 a.m. and I would try to exercise and read the news and they would just kind of sit in the room with me. So some of it is you will adjust to it. I am a person who likes to go to bed at like 9:00, so I'll have to adjust that. I mean, I never end up sleeping at 9:00, but 10:30, I like to go to bed. So that's going to be an adjustment. But the way I think about it is, I'm a huge consumer of news, obviously. And that continues even on days when you're off, right? I still want to kind of know where things are traveling. I'm still talking to people that I know in politics or whatever it may be. But you also have to be present in the moment of the day, right? And so I think about it like I'm going to take my kids to school in the morning. I can walk them to school if we want to walk. I'll get back. I will spend a lot of time reading. The more time you can read and consume and know all the ins and outs of things, the better. And then you have to give enough time in the day to know where it's headed, right? You can't write your A block at 9 a.m. because you don't even know what's happened in the day. So there are some people who have many superpowers. I mean, Rachel's meeting is much later in the day than ours will be because she's just who knows. But that's how I've thought about it. Trying to be present in the moments of the day is the best. That's the best advice I've given myself as I've had weird jobs at weird times. So be present in the morning, make breakfast, take my kids to school, and then dive in and read as much as you can and be present in whatever crazy thing's going to happen that day.
And you said too, it's not just about the TV show from 9 to 10, right? You're very active social media.
This is also true. Yeah. Thank you for raising that. I mean, one of the things also just that I take from my past life is that, and this is true whether you're in media or whether you're just somebody who's running for office on whatever party you're in, is like, you can't just at 10:01, it can't be that the only other time I engage is not until 9:00 the next night, because there's an expectation. This is why podcasts are so popular, is like of informality, of conversation, of engagement. And also, I think it's fun that there's only 42 minutes in a show. You can't cover everything, right. But you can talk about something on TikTok. You can do an interview with somebody on YouTube. You can do a podcast. And those are other things I think everybody kind of has to do everything right now, because that's how you engage with audiences. And if there was one thing, everybody would be doing it. There isn't one clear silver bullet. So we all got to try lots of stuff.
Last thing before I let you go, do you see yourself as a TV lifer at this point, or could you ever see yourself getting back in the game, like actually inside the politics?
I like to joke if when I'm in my 70s, they want to just like send me to a warm climate to be an ambassador, that would be a dream. But otherwise, I've kind of done all of the things that I wanted to do in government. And I will always have a huge respect for public service, but I love the media world. I think it's really interesting. It's going to continue to evolve. As you know, what does it look like in 5 years? Are we all doing podcasts on YouTube with sneakers on from our homes? Maybe. I'm not going to fight that trend. We don't know. But what I love about it, which is not dissimilar from my past life, is that I learn something new every day. And I'm always pushing myself to better understand and question. And that is true in government. It's true in this world. I get to work with amazing, interesting, smart, compelling people. For now, I can't imagine until they're like, would you like to be the ambassador to a warm climate one day? And then I'm like, great, I would like to do that when I'm older.
Well, Jen, I know you're super busy getting ready for your show. I really appreciate your time. Good luck with the new show. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
And that's it for season 2 of the Poynter Report podcast. Thanks so much for listening. If you like what you hear, give us a like and a nice review. It helps us a bunch. And we will return with season 3 in June. We'll talk to you then.
Thank you for listening to the Poynter Report Podcast. The podcast is produced by the Department of Journalism and Digital Communication at the University of South Florida, St. Petersburg. Executive producers are Elliot Weiser and Ren LaForme. Producers are Noah Chase, Rhiannon McIsaac, and Tom Jones. Director is Christopher Campbell. And a special thank you to Neil Brown and Dr. Mark Walter.